traffic, Copeland 4041 uniform, departing 11, rider and crew.
4, 5, 6 turns, started to feel nauseous and then come out of it, and then I would go up again. And at that moment there was chaos all around. The radio got alive, the task was stopped. Some pilots decided to fly straight on. I saw them, that was not the best option because they got sucked up really hard into the surrounding cells.
This is Soaring the Sky, a glider pilot's podcast, coming to you from the Mid-Atlantic region here in the United States and bringing you great soaring content from glider pilots all over the globe. We now join Chuck and our guest pilot.
Thank you so much for joining us again here on the podcast. If it's your first episode with us, I hope you enjoyed and come back to check out our future episodes. And while you're waiting, you can check out our large library of guest pilots sharing their soaring adventures from all over the world. You can even check out some of those pictures they submitted to on soaringthesky.com. On today's episode, we head to Belgium to chat with Wim Decrook, a competition paraglider pilot with over 1,000 hours. Before finding his sweet spot in the cockpit of a sailplane, Wim competed a lot. He was ranked second in the serial class at the British Open in Spain in 2019, third overall at Mossella Open in France, also in that same year. His best soaring season in a paraglider, he logged over 140 hours. Now, these are just some of his accomplishments. Wim will share some of those experiences at those competitions, like the time he ended up being stuck between two thunderstorms and how he managed to escape and land unharmed. Another time, he found himself landing in a swamp and soon standing in his underwear, pulling off leeches from his body. Wim has learned a lot about soaring and talks about how it has made his transition to a glider much easier and what we all can learn from his amazing journey. Wings and Wheels has been serving the soaring and sport aviation community for over 30 years. They hands down have the largest and most comprehensive inventory of sailplane and soaring supplies in North America. And they ship globally. Nearly everything you'll find on their site is in stock and ready for same-day shipping. Wings and Wheels is the exclusive American representative for HPH sailplanes. Be sure to check out the Twin Shark, their latest launch. They're also now the exclusive distributor in North America for the new Just Soaring Glider Sim Pro. The team has thousands of hours of flying experience in gliders and airplanes, staffed by Adam, Kelly, Julie, and Sean. A friendly voice will answer when you call or email them. Check them out at wingsandwheels.com. Wim, welcome to Soaring the Sky. How are you doing?
Fine. Hi, Chuck. Enjoying a nice Saturday afternoon here in Belgium. So, yeah, I'm fine. Thank you.
Beautiful. And I want to hear more about where you are a little bit here later in the podcast. So how did your soaring adventure begin? Well, how did your aviation story begin?
Well, then we have to go back to 2006. At that time, I was joining an adventure holiday with my wife in the French Alps. So we were staying in this lovely remote house in the mountains. And then during the day, we would do this paragliding course with the French paragliding school.
Beautiful.
And yeah, it was a basic course. So 5 days or 6 days of flying with one reserve day in case of bad weather. And the first 3 days we were on the training hill, trying to run off the hill with the paragliding above our head. And then the aim of that week was to do a first solo flight, of course with radio guidance, from a high hill, which we successfully did. So yeah, it was a very nice way to discover this aviation sport.
You literally jumped right into aviation, right?
Yeah, somehow, yeah.
I mean, how do you go from wanting to fly to sticking a wing on your back and jumping off a hill? I mean, that had to have been pretty exciting and lots of adrenaline. How did it feel?
Well, to start with, the French paragliding school, and yeah, it suited me and my wife very well. They had this very laid-back approach. So typical French instructors wearing flip-flops, tent, and very laid-back approach, but still with a focus on safety. And it was all about feeling good and feeling comfortable. So you didn't have to do that first flight if you didn't feel up to it. And also, compared to flying sailplanes with a paraglider, there's not much added value in flying a tandem paraglider. You have to fly on your own. So with a paraglider, yeah, the beginning can be a bit more dramatic because your big flight is alone first. But they did it very well, and I remember they had like this made-up 10-point checklist where basically they run through the basic stuff like helmet attached and leg strap closed, but they made just 10 more things to come up with, like a left shoe tight, right shoe tight. And I remember standing on the hill on that first big flight. It was like an 800 meter top to bottom, overflying a lake in
Oh,
the
nice.
morning. So with that air, and the view was lovely, so it was quite safe in hindsight. So I was doing this 10-point checklist, and the instructor on launch was like, "Wim, you forgot number 10." And I said, like, "Guys, really? I'm standing on the hill, strapped in, ready to go. What was number 10?" And he said, like, "Smile."
Oh my goodness.
And then run off the hill, and yeah, it was nice. Nice
Wow.
experience.
So you would go on to fly paragliders a lot. So tell us about that.
Yeah, that was my first touch with the sport. And then I only did it in holidays the first year, so I went back to that French paragliding school for 2 more years. So continued training only in summer holidays. So I got my flying license in 2008. And then from there on, in the beginning, I only did like 20, 30 hours a year, just discovering the Belgian sites. It was until like 2014-ish, maybe 2015, that I really figured out that, hey, if I want to progress, flying competitions is a good way to do it. And fast forward to like 2019, 2020, I was ranking up between 120, 150 flying hours a year.
Wow.
I'm just shy of 1,000 flying hours now, flying paragliders all over the world. So, yeah.
Wow. And a beautiful part of the world. I can't imagine some of the sights you get to see.
Yeah, and so I have the luck to live in Europe. So the Alps are only an 8-hour drive south. So that's nice. And then with a paraglider, logistics are very simple. So it's just a backpack of around 20 to 25 kilograms, depending on what you stuff in there. So in winter, I did 2 competitions in Colombia, South Africa, Mexico.
Oh,
So
nice.
there was no real winter layoff if you were up to that. So yeah, nice way to fly the world.
Yeah. What was one of your most memorable flights, good or bad, in a paraglider? What did you learn from it?
Well, let me think out loud here for a while. Oh, there are so many good memories. I remember landing in a swamp in Colombia, which was not very nice, but funny
Oh,
in hindsight.
yeah, that
uh,
sounds little scary.
yeah, yeah, it was okay. It was only knee deep. What else was there? Getting welcomed by 2 young brothers wearing sombreros, riding a horse in Mexico in a remote village near a volcano.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, getting a flyby hello from sailplanes while cruising the Belgium skies, and he was doing wingovers next to me,
Ah,
which was also
nice.
really nice. Yeah. Yeah, I remember once taking off from a Belgian site, and yeah, Belgium is not very big, of course, so we easily cross borders. And I landed near Reims, which is the Champagne region. Landed near a champagne farmer, was invited to his house. We started tasting champagne, and while I was waiting for the retrieve driver, we emptied quite some glasses of champagne, and I came home very late that day with a few bottles of champagne in my backpack. So it was very nice as well. The one that stood out, I think it was when I got nearly sucked up in a thunderstorm in Macedonia. That was, yeah. And
Oh,
maybe I will go for that one because there are some lessons learned in that story as well. So if you're fine with it, I'll tell that story.
absolutely. Love to hear that one.
Okay, so what year is this? Can't exactly remember. I think somewhere 2016, 17-ish. I traveled to Macedonia for the British Open, which was a rather high competition level field. At that time, I was flying a two-liner, which is a competition wing. And with paragliders, the weight range does matter. So you have a minimum and a maximum weight range. That one was until 115 kilograms. I was flying competition harness as well with 2 reserve parachutes, so a heavy pack. And yeah, I was quite high in the weight range already, like 114-ish. So if I would add my camelback to the pack, then I would be at the max weight range, which kind of kills the climbing of the climb ratio, if you want, as well. So it has an impact. So that morning, I remember having breakfast in the hotel, and they had like a nice big breakfast room overlooking the valley with like big windows. And we could immediately see that the sky was overcast. So I had a breakfast, enjoyed a few cups of coffee, went back to the hotel room because the buses that would shuttle to lounge were still a few hours away. So got my kit ready, radio charged, double checking everything. And I double checked top meteo, and the day was forecasted to have very light climb rates, like 0.5 meters per second. But also at the same time, the day was forecasted with a fair chance of thunderstorms. But having flown the Alps quite some time, it's like summertime. There are big like thermals around everywhere, and you have like those big mountains. So in summer, if you there's always risk for thunderstorm left and right, isn't it? So I wasn't too concerned about that. So I was looking at my paragliding kit, and I was overthinking it. Like, hey, where can I save like around 1 kilogram of weight? And I thought like, hey, I'm having this anti-G chute that weighs 800 grams. Maybe I can leave that one out. And an anti-G chute, that's what we as paraglider pilots use to get down very quickly. Obviously, we don't have like air brakes. So if we want to get down, what we most of the time do is like 360 degrees. But if you do that steep bank 360 degrees, it's like swinging a bucket of water around. So you end up with some G forces that can go up to like 2.5, maybe 3 Gs if you're really aggressive on those turns.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I don't cope very well with G forces. I'm quite tall, and I'm doing endurance sports like jogging and bike riding. But I thought, yeah, I don't need this G chute with the forecast, so let's leave it. And I remember standing at the door at my hotel room, and I left the G chute on the hotel bed, like thinking, okay, when I come back in the evening, then I immediately see it, and then I can put it back in my equipment for the next day, so it won't linger around in my room. So long story short, we were shuttled to lounge, task briefing. The day was overcast, and the meet director set like a mediocre task, 20 kilometers north somewhere to take a waypoint in the mountains, and then the goal line was somewhere in the middle of the valley coming back south for another 30 kilometers. So that's 50 kilometers. From a gliding point of view, if you multiply those distances with 4 to 5, depending on what ship you fly, then yeah, that would give you an indication on how big that task was for paragliders. Yeah, and we got in the air and the star gaggle. Oh, it was really tense. Competition field was 120 pilots, so we were all in those light conditions, flying very close, not going up very well. There were people dumping water ballast. There were even guys sipping on their camelbacks and spitting the water back out to get as light as possible on their wings. So that
Oh,
kind
man.
of day. Yeah. And it took us a lot of effort to take that most northerly waypoint, scraping the tree line through the mountain ridges. There was not much of an anabatic flow on the mountainside as well. And I was in the second gaggle, and I saw the lead gaggle tagging the northerly waypoint, and they chose the same route back because normally the mountain route is the fastest route, isn't it? And I was like, no way, guys. I have been touching trees for 1.5 hours to get here. I'm not going to fly back through the mountains. And luckily for me, in that second gaggle, we all had the same ID. So we just turned south, taking the valley route. And at that time, the sky was opening from time to time. So there was some sunshine on the ground. And I thought, like, this might actually work because the mountainside was in the shadows or was shadowed out, and the valley there was some sun. So I thought, like, okay, if the air is unstable enough, that might give us lifty lines all the way back to goal, which kind of was what happened for the first like half an hour. And we were keeping a close eye on the lead gaggle back north in the mountains. And yeah, I think what happened that day was it was so shaded out that the air was feeding into the valley. So those guys, the lead gaggle, landed out. And all of a sudden I realized, like, hey, Wim, you're in the lead gaggle now in the British Open on a straight course line to go. Like, you're ace, man.
Nice.
Yeah, but it's aviation sport, isn't it? So you're hero next one moment and you're zero the next moment. So that's what literally happened. So we continued that flight, and the patches of sunshine got bigger. So the sky opened up a bit, and what we could see was that the sky was really overdeveloped. So we had like big cumulonimbus clouds embedded in the gray. At that moment, I started to feel uncomfortable. Like, oh, this is getting dodgy. But you're in a competition and you're surrounded with other pilots, so thought like, okay, let's continue a bit. I can still spiral down later on if I don't like this anymore. And then all of a sudden, that was my first thought. Somebody on my left-hand side on the course line, I thought he's taking a picture with a flashlight. Until the thunder came 5 seconds later. So we had a big thunder cell dropping rain on the left-hand side of the valley in the mountains.
Wow.
And the radio came alive. People feeding the meter actor with information like, hey, this is pilot number, because you're giving a pilot number. I'm seeing this is my position. And by that time, I was not trying to stay up anymore. So I was not flying the most lifty lines anymore. It was just like a natural reaction. So I was like, okay, I don't like this anymore. But the air started to go up very easily by that time. And a few moments later, I figured out that on the right-hand side of the course line, so on the other side of the valley, there was also a thunderstorm developing and already producing lightning.
Oh.
So I figured out at that moment, I thought like, okay, we're flying in this valley with lifty lines, so the valley has some kind of energy in it. If those storms, those cells start dropping rain, then that cold airflow might flow into the valley, and then the air only has one way to go, and that's up, and we're in the middle of this. So I called out my pilot number and my position, and I said like, this is pilot, can't recall my pilot number anymore, level 3, which basically means in paragliding competitions like unsafe. I decide to go and land. So I started to do spirals, but by that time everything was going up by more than 3 meters a second. So I would do a spiral, and then 4, 5, 6 turns, started to feel nauseous, and then come out of it, and then I would go up again. And at that moment, there was chaos all around. The radio got alive, the task was stopped. Some pilots decided to fly straight on. I saw them, that was not the best option, because they got sucked up really hard into the sky, into the surrounding cells. Later that evening, we found out that those pilots, they had to continue straight on for more than 70 kilometers, and they ended up in Greece, so crossing the border.
Wow.
The retrieve crew had quite some issues because Macedonia is not part of the EU, and they had to collect pilots that somehow ended up in the European Union without passport. So that also was a mess.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And other pilots around me, they started to do spirals as well. And I saw their G-chutes coming out. And that was when that image of that G-chute lying on the hotel bed jumped in my head again. I was like, well, Wim, you screwed that up properly, didn't you?
Oh, no.
But yeah, it's always like when you're feeling endangered that you can go the extra mile. So I pushed as hard as I could and released the 360 degrees about 100 meters above the ground, picked the biggest field that I could find. And then when I released or came out of the 360, I was going up again at 4 meters a second by that time. Trees were waving all around, so I had to spiral again under 50 meters above the ground. And I was flying backwards at that time, so my wing had a trim speed of like 40 kilometers an hour, and I was going backwards at more than 12 kilometers an hour
Mm.
with the odd gust coming in as well. So, but yeah, long story short, I landed safely. I didn't even bother packing my wing. I just stuffed it in a backpack. While doing that, the sky opened and it started to really like pour rain and hail and stuff like that.
Wow.
Walked to the middle of the field next to another pilot who landed there, and we like gave this man hug to each other, like we survived this.
Yeah.
Yeah, got to the
Oh,
road and the cars were stopped, indicating with their four indicators because it was too dangerous to drive because yeah, it was pouring like hell, and we walked in the middle of the road, soaked to our underpants, to the nearest pub and had a beer.
wow.
Yeah. So the reason I come up with this story is like my takeaway from that was like participating in a competition. It's not an excuse to stop doing what you always did as a pilot. So we have a certain degree of experience, and you kind of develop, at least that's my experience, an inner voice that keeps you out of troubles most of the time. When that voice starts to speak with you in a competition environment, don't get caught into the herd mentality and listen to it. That was my biggest takeaway from that. And after that competition, I did a few other competitions where I did exactly that. So when I would feel like, okay, I'm not feeling comfortable anymore, I remember something like that in the Swiss Alps. I was caught in a valley. I didn't know what the wind was doing. I didn't understand the conditions, and I decided to go and land. And sometimes I did that, and the task would be stopped 20 minutes later, so that might have been a good decision. And then other times, nothing happened, and the other pilots continued to go, and I was stuck in the retrieve bus and came home late. And they were having their war stories about the competition day, and I would have to live with my decision. But yeah, that's the beauty of the sport, isn't it? You have to make your own decisions and try to keep yourself safe while doing this, yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful sport. So, yeah.
absolutely. Wow, thanks for that story. It's amazing. Glad it all turned out well. Okay, so we're going to move on to gliders. That is our main focus here on the podcast. But I could honestly listen to you tell stories all day about the paragliding. That's some crazy stuff. But we are curious about how you got inspired to jump into sailplanes after you had so many hours under a paraglider wing. How did that happen?
Um, well, for me, there are three main reasons for switching from flying paragliders to flying sailplanes. Um, I'll put them in order from least important to most important. So the first reason was if you want to exploit the max out of a flying day or exploit the max potential out of a flying day, then my preference in Belgium at least would be flying sailplanes. We have small hills in Belgium, especially in the south part. That's the only part where we have hills. So the smallest hill we have, it's like 80 meters top to bottom. That's 80. You need some kind of wind hitting that hill to maintain your altitude and soar that until you catch a thermal and get away. I think the biggest height difference we have, it's like 220 meters, something like that. So you can go and decide to go flying on any given day with like the most epic forecast. And then you end up in the hill and the wind is not 100% on the hill, or the conditions are a bit off. That can mean, as a paraglider pilot, that you won't fly that day. You will try a few times to get off the hill, end up landing, and then have to walk up again. There have been days that I went out trying to get a nice flying day with an epic forecast, and then you drive 2 hours with your car, do a few attempts, and yeah, the forecast was a bit off, and you have to drive home another 2 hours, not having flown. If
Yeah,
I compare that with flying sailplanes, it's like on any given day, even with a mediocre forecast, I ended up flying to the gliding club, joined the morning brief, and then whenever I felt up to it or the plane was available, I would take an aerotow and that could be 500 meters or 750, whatever you felt up to, and they will put you in a thermal. It's much easier and you're much more likely to get away and actually fly. So another reason was that I experienced the dark side of the sport, let's put it like that. So let's be honest here, paragliding is still an extreme sport. Somehow there are the odd accidents, and yeah, they can be with severe consequences. So I've never had an accident or an incident until 2020. So I started 2006, so that's 14 years without any incident whatsoever. Maybe the odd rougher landing, but still, if I can't remember, then it wasn't that much of an issue, I reckon. But in January 2020, while participating in a competition in Colombia, I had to throw my reserve for the first time in my paragliding career. Yeah, not going into all of the details, but what basically happened was a mixture of being preoccupied with work, dealing with emails while waiting in the line to pass customs in Colombia. So, yeah, a lot on my head, not flying related. Being jet lagged, not having drunk enough water, so being dehydrated a bit on launch. Being overconfident, not paying attention, and yeah, that mixture, 2,000 meters, I got a collapse and went into a locked-in spiral, and I saw the black tunnel closing in. So that's when you are about to pass out because of the G-forces.
Wow.
I never thought about throwing my reserve. It was pure instinct. So I was like, oh, look at this package. I threw my reserve. So it opened then. Yeah, 2 kilometers to reflect on life before coming back to Earth because I was at 2,000 meters. So I walked away from that physically unharmed, but I guess it might have left some mental scars anyway. So that was my first touch with the dark side. And then in spring 2020, only a few months later, I was soaring at my local site in Belgium, which I have soared for several times. And I had this like new wing, which was white color. And yeah, I tried to go cross country, it didn't work, and I had to land out. So there was like this big brown plowed field, and I thought like, wow, you can put a glider in here, but I'm flying this white wing, so my wing might get dirty. What else is
Yeah.
here? And
Yeah.
there was like this huge tree line with big oak trees, a very small grassy field next to it, and then barbed wire, and then you had a huge brown plowed field. So instead of picking the huge field, I decided somehow to park my glider, or to try it to park it in between the barbed fence wire and the tree line. And while doing so, my wingtip caught a tree, and I basically fell from like 6 meters high. Luckily, I walked away from that because the hill was kind of sloping down, and my wingtip got released from the tree in the process. But that was pure being overconfident, so that was a stupid mistake. Still kind of mad at myself till today that kind of happened. So that was incident number 2, and then that year, it was not the best year, was it? I had another incident. In summer of 2020, I was, so only a few months after the spring incident, I was doing a competition in France with a inexperienced organization. So it was their first competition. It was in Annecy, which is a beautiful location in the northern Alps in France. So it's a lake surrounded by mountains, and yeah, very nice place to fly paragliders. And that day, they had set a cat's cradle task into the mountains and then landing back at the lake. And during the task briefing, one of the guys, paragliding competition, who also was in the competition, he pointed out like, hey guys, I'm pushing this task into my instruments, and I have a library of objects in my instrument, and there's apparently a cable running from the valley floor to the top of the ridge where a waypoint has been put.
Oh, wow.
The radius around that waypoint was 3 kilometers, and Speaking of that cable, that was a cable car size cable which was
Oh,
used, to pull equipment up to the mountain hut. And the answer of the task committee was like, yeah, we looked into this, and from our experience, everybody will be flying above the ridge, and there's no need to put a bigger radius around that waypoint. It's okay.
hmm.
I mean, I'm part of a competition, and I'm paying for being guided into flying in this region. That's part of the deal, isn't it? So they know better than I. So everybody like accepted that, and then the competition task started, and it was one of those days where the thermals would be over the mountains. Yeah, they always are, isn't it? But they would shade out, and then the cloud shade would stay a long time above the mountains, so you would end up with like dead air above the mountains. So it was one of those days where flying into the sun worked much better because you could get those small developing thermals, and then that was the tactic of that day. So I tried to attack that waypoint with a mountain hut for the first time, but flew into dead air and had to go back into the sun for a few kilometers and re-attack it. And I saw the lead gaggle; they were a bit higher, and they attacked the waypoint, came back, and so we were a few gaggles behind the lead gaggle, and our gaggle was unlucky, so most of us ended up below the ridge. And I was like, okay, I don't like this flying too close to the tree line, hugging the rocks, because if I end up in sync, then if I don't give myself enough of a margin, then I might end up in a tree. So I kind of veered off towards the valley. And then I remembered, like, hey, but I'm not far from this waypoint anymore. Wasn't there? And while I was thinking that, the radio came alive, and people started to figure out that the cable was right in front of us. People in front of me, some of them never noticed the cable, they just flew underneath it, others flew over it. We basically all got lucky. I had the cable right in front of me and I had to spin the glider around and fly away.
Oh, wow.
So I said, okay, that's it. Let's go back to goal. Don't fancy tagging any other waypoints here. Had enough of this. Packed my wing, had a beer in the goal field, and then my idea was to walk up to the organization and point out, like, hey guys, this was not the best plan, was it?
Yeah.
That was all I needed, like just a confirmation, like, okay, we messed up. Sorry, guys. But they just laughed with it, like, hey, nobody touched the cable, and what's the problem? Are you complaining
Oh,
here
wow.
because you scored 0 because you didn't tag the waypoint? I said, no, guys, I mean, this is about safety.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that was the issue with all the other pilots as well. It was like, that's the only thing we needed the next day was like a task committee that openly said, like, hey, guys, sorry that happened. We screwed up. Let's have fun again and focus on safe. But yeah, don't silence the issue. That was
Yeah. Wow.
yeah. So I figured out, well, 2020 is not the best year. Maybe it's time. I know already was looking into flying sailplanes for a few years already, but not really taking the bait. And yeah, the third reason why I switched was, and I will call this peer pressure. So I started to compete mainly because I wanted to advance as a pilot. And before you know it, you somehow, because I did in the end like 5-6 competitions a year, and then your pilot level just goes up very steeply.
Yeah.
Because you see every mistake you make. It's like if you fly on your own, you don't have any other guys in the air where you can make the connection with yourself. But for example, in a competition environment, if you're in the start gaggle and you decide to cross the start line and other people are higher, then you can see immediately the effect. Just a stupid example, but I mean, you can see and compare your own performance. So yeah, it's a quick learning environment. I would put it like that. So that was the main reason I joined competitions. But yeah, at certain moment, you start to have some sort of results, and then before you know it, you're dragged into WhatsApp groups and the Belgian Federation is contacting you, and from an ego point of view, that's all fine. But the thing that bothered me, for example, was I once did a competition after a long winter break, just drove to the Alps. My goal that competition was just to get back in the game, and I had a mediocre day, ending up halfway the competition field that day, halfway the scoring list. But I met some friends that I hadn't seen for a long time. It was just after the COVID story, so we were able to travel again. So it was a nice atmosphere at the goal field, nice weather, nice views, having a beer with guys you haven't seen for a while. So having fun. And
Yeah,
then all of a
absolutely.
sudden your cell phone starts receiving WhatsApp messages like, "Hey Wim, don't feel bad about today. Tomorrow's another day." I'm like, seriously, guys, I'm here to have fun. It's not about points all the time, is it? So yeah, and I think those three reasons combined all together said, okay, let's have a break from this and let's go all in and try something new and sailplanes, and let's see how far we can get and go from here on. So yeah.
So how was the transition from paragliders to sailplanes?
Um, the hardest things for me were the use of stick and rudder versus weight shift and use of your arms.
Right?
So it's more mechanical piloting sailplane, and then maintaining the same airspeed because a few centimeters on the stick can make quite some difference
Yeah.
in airspeed, isn't it? Flying a pattern. I remember the instructors in the early days. They were like, I was asking questions like, "Do I really have to fly a pattern?" They were like, "What?" Because with a paraglider, I mean, I can stuff it in a football stadium if you want.
Right?
We're not bothered with flying patterns, so it's like, do I really have to do this? And they were
Oh
like,
my.
"Yeah, Wim, you have to do this, man." Okay, then. Um, what else is there? I'm still struggling to get a good feeling for the glide ratio. So luckily, there are other flying buddies in the gliding club that also fly paragliders, and sometimes we fly together in a twin. And then I'm like, "Hey, we're way too far from the field now. There's no way we can go back." And they're like, "Wim, seriously? If we turn back now, we will arrive at 700 meters." And I'm like, "No, no way. We will be landing out." And then a few times they actually did that. It's like, "Okay, Wim, you're flying now. Grab the stick and fly
Right?
back to the field." And then we arrive at not 700 but 800 meters. I'm like, "Okay, guys, okay, this is embarrassing."
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, can you give us all the details of the current glider port you fly out of and what you like about it?
Yes. So before I started gliding, I looked around quite a lot. So I have the possibility to join French-speaking gliding clubs or Dutch-speaking gliding clubs. Doesn't really matter for me. For me, the focus was about having a good atmosphere because,
Yeah,
yeah, that's for me. That's a good learning environment, and I do rather well if I'm surrounded by people that like have a nice approach to things. So that was my
absolutely.
main focus. And I ended up in, it's called Balen-Keiheuvel. It's in the northern part of Belgium. It's 1 hour drive from where I live. And it's a 700-meter long grassy field, 0725. And it's surrounded by sandy underground, so it has good thermal potential on any given day. So, yeah, I like it very much. A very nice atmosphere.
Nice. So, what are your goals in soaring in the future? Are you going to stick to sailplanes?
Yeah, definitely. So, uh, when I went over to the club, I said like, "Okay, guys, I'm serious about this," and they said, "Yeah, yeah." So that winter, I did all my theoretical stuff. So before even my first training flight, I already had done the theoretical part. My goal was to push hard, so I started somewhere late January, and somewhere late August, I got my SPL. So yeah,
Nice.
pushed hard.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And I've, yeah, for still, I'm happy to be on this podcast, but I'm the definition of a rookie. So I have 36 flying hours solo. So yeah, who am I to comment on flying sailplanes? My goal is, well, I did do one like very nice flight in an Arcus flying 660 kilometers. Somebody allowed me to go with him, and I was like, wow, this is what I want to do. It's like going out big on any given day. And for me, it's not about the numbers. It's about being able to come back to your home field and being out all day. And also for paragliding, it's like the best part of any given flight for me. It's like you're halfway into the flight and you're maybe a little bit tired already, a little bit thirsty, but you're tuned into the conditions. You're flying your craft, and yeah, there's you're in a remote place. It's not like you're doing a team sport like playing soccer, or you're alone up there. You're responsible for yourself, and it's all about adventure and trying to realize your own potential on any given day. It's like playing chess against nature and yourself, isn't it? It's like,
Yep.
yeah, that's for me is it's and the charm is there in flying paragliders, but also in flying sailplanes, because I didn't knew before will that aspect be still there. But I've done flights, yeah, 4 hour plus solo flights. I have to stay around the airfield still, but that feeling of being tuned into the conditions, and yeah, it's still there. So for me, my main focus will be on flying sailplanes and hopefully flying a solo glider next season. Most probably that will be an LS4 because I don't fit in any other wings. I'm quite tall. And yeah, hopefully go cross country and see what's possibly from there on.
Nice. Sounds like a good plan. When we always like to give our guests the opportunity to give a shout out to those, of course, that were instrumental in their aviation journey. So this is your chance.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, my wife and family, because we as soaring pilots, it's not always, we're not the most easy people to live with because we want to go out on, when we have plans, they always change because the weather is playing ball as well. So big shout
Right?
out to my wife and family, allowing me to go out as often as I can. And all the paragliding and sailplane pilots who invested time in making me a better pilot. I mean, yeah, really appreciate it. Like, I think that's the role in our small community as well. Like, we have to look out for each other and comment on flying styles and giving tips. And yeah, we all benefit from that, I think.
Absolutely. All right. How about a lightning round? Are you up for it?
Okay, shoot.
All right. If you could pick just one, what glider port or region would be at the top of your bucket list to go soaring, and why?
Um, can't come up with a name yet, but having flown paragliders quite a lot in the Alps is definitely on my bucket list. I have to break myself a bit, and my goal for next season is to really like become a better pilot. But as soon as turmoiling and landing and all that kind of stuff is like a non-issue anymore, and you're not like really thinking about that, then I will start exploring the Alps. I think, yeah, any given airport would do.
Very nice. Yeah. What's the highest altitude you've ever been in a glider or a paraglider, and where was it?
In a glider, it was this season. We had like an exceptional weather this summer in Belgium. It was around 2,000 meters, and yeah, the
Nice.
our glider field is around, yeah, just shy of sea level, so that's quite nice. In a paraglider, it was more than 4,000 meters. That
Oh,
was in
well.
Spain, yeah, somewhere during summer, very cold night temperatures, and then if you have day temperatures running into the 40s with unstable air mass, then yeah, you have high cloud bases.
Yeah, they're popping. Yeah. What's your favorite type of lift? Thermal, wave, ridge, or conversions?
For paragliders, thermals, and I'm really curious about flying conversion lines with sailplanes. We sometimes do it with paragliders, I've done it quite sometimes in Spain as well, but you don't have the speed to profit as much as you would be able to profit from that kind of lift in a sailplane. So I'm really looking forward in exploring that kind of lift in a sailplane.
Wim, what's the strangest or most spectacular thing you have ever seen up in the air, whether it be in a paraglider or a sailplane?
Most spectacular thing. Well, I was attacked by a bird in Mexico. Does that count?
Oh yeah, wow! Tell me about that.
Well, yeah, somewhere during a competition in Mexico, I was doing a transition from one waypoint to another, and this bird showed up on the right hand side of my wing. It started like making those high, creepy bird sounds, and it started to
Oh no!
dive for my paraglider wing. And I tried to shout and collapse the wing to scare it away. But it had a few goes at my wing, and I remember repairing like two ribs in my wing. So yeah, credit to the bird.
Wow. What's the worst place you've landed out, whether in a paraglider or a sailplane, and why did it suck?
Definitely the swamp in Colombia.
Yeah.
uh,
If
yeah, so I was in Colombia, and it was my first time. So I was flying that region like I would have done it in Belgium. So pick the biggest green field. So that was what I did until I realized a few meters from that field that, hey, what's this like strange reflection of this field? So like, oh man, this is a swamp. So I was able to like extend my glide until the edge, but still ended up knee deep in a swamp, swearing all the time, walking out of it. And then I ended up in my underpants at a nearby rock, pulling off bloodsuckers out of my legs. I was like, oh dear.
oh
Yeah.
wow.
It was not the nicest of experience. So yeah, that would be my worst landing, I reckon.
If you had to pick one thing for lower hour pilots trying to learn how to thermal more efficiently and effectively, what would your advice be to them?
Um, yeah, obviously it's all about airspeed, and the guys in the gliding club, and I feel it myself as well with the sailplane now, uh, keeping the angle of bank and not allowing the airspeed to run up. That's something I still have to really pay attention to. But yeah, going a bit further now into that question, what I did see in the past, and maybe it's also a bit related to flying sailplanes. It's like the way they teach people to become a pilot. So in the old days, and I'm talking 2006 now, it was very easy to become a paraglider pilot. You just joined this school, they would do like a few training weeks with you, and then signed off you go. But guess what? The most dangerous part of any pilot's career is when you're exploring and you don't know what you don't know. And I'm not saying this like that. It's like that's the biggest risk, isn't it? So you're putting yourself in compromised
Absolutely.
places and you don't know what's really dangerous about that. So uh,
Yep.
nowadays, I that is changing. At least in Belgium, I see like the schools they're providing like guided weeks with their students, so they have their license, but they provide like guided weeks into the Alps, and they look after them and try to fly a task together. So that is something that I will do next season as well. Like have a few flights in a double seater, try to go cross country, just to learn. If you're always on your own, you learn as well, but sometimes you have to switch and fly with other pilots, and yeah, they can see stuff that you're doing wrong before a bad habit kicks in. So yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay, money no object, and you could only spend it on a glider. What dream glider would you buy, and what do you like about
Yeah, something with a fast. Yeah,
Right?
avoiding to have to call my wife late evening, like, honey, can you come to this field?
Good luck with
Yeah,
that one.
so I think an LS8 Neo with a vest, that's something very nice, I think.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So you get to your pad after a long day of soaring in the summer heat. What's the first thing you do? Take a shower, drink a cold beverage of choice, look at your flight trace and start making notes of what you did wrong, or flop on the bed and take a nap while still wearing your bucket hat?
I would take care of the glider first, put it in the trailer, and then go for a beer.
Did you get your bucket hat yet?
What's that, a bucket hat?
You didn't get one
No,
yet, did you?
no.
Wim, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I have had a blast talking to you. I appreciate you joining us.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me on the podcast.
Absolutely.
If you would like to say hi and let us know where you are enjoying the podcast, we would love to hear from you. If you are a glider pilot and want to share your aviation journey, contact us at chuck@soaringthesky.com or send us a message on our website at soaringthesky.com and Chuck will get in touch with you. We hope you join us next time for another soaring adventure here on Soaring the Sky, a Glider Pilots podcast. Soaring the Sky is written and produced by Chuck Fulton. Original music for the podcast was written and produced by Kim Spangler. Graphic design for the podcast was created by Zachary Fulton. Voiceover work was done by Michelle Perez.